So now we've got our project named, we have our intention, and we know what materials we want to use. The next thing we need to outline or define is what preparations need to be made for this activity. How should it be set up? This isn't about creating the resources that you need. This is about how you're going to actually set it up and in what physical space that's going to be done in. Again, this goes back to being able to have this to be able to be recreated easily or by someone else. So let's jump into the why. Why do we want to do this? There should um, where should this setup be? And why do we want to know what this is? It's because it helps keeps us organized. We want to make sure that that space is available. Is it going to be a gross motor space? Is that gross motor space available at the time that you want to do this? Or are there going to be other children around in that gross motor space? That is going to be something to think about. Do you need to move any furniture? Do you want to set up any yoga mats? Do you want to have the children take responsibility for moving the furniture or setting up yoga mats? With the infant activity, of course, they're not going to be gathering anything. So understanding how this will be set up, having all of the scarves in the basket, having the music queued up and ready to go with the mats laid out in a circle. That would be the way to set that up. Where will the collected materials be? Are they going to be just in the classroom, just available? Are they going to be in a basket? Are they going to be previously set up? Again, are the children going to go around and collect them? So having all of this clearly defined helps keep you organized, organize your thoughts, and helps you realize, oh, wait, maybe this isn't the best activity to do in this space when you start thinking it through. Examples for the preparations for setting up an activity. It really should only take a few minutes and should not distract from your role inside of the classroom unless it's something that you're doing with the children. So if the children are participating in the preparations, then they absolutely can. And it might take a few more minutes, especially if you're like rolling out yoga mats or you're collecting materials. Collecting materials from around the classroom, or even from around the building, really shouldn't be happening during this time. It's outlined here where you're going to be and what sort of preparations you need to make inside of your space for that. And so in this first example, we can see that the practitioner was defining where inside the classroom. So it's going to be in a quiet corner of the classroom. And what she's going to need. She's going to need a speaker that can play instrumental music, and having that already queued up inside of whatever app she's using for the music. And also being able to have scarves or anything in a basket set up and ready for her to use for this particular activity. This is very clearly defined and very easy to follow, even if you weren't the person who wrote the. Here we have two examples of ones that are just not really quite perfect. The first one is should be in a calm role, not the classroom. So she's defining a space outside of the classroom. A quiet space with minimal distractions inside the classroom can be very distracting if there are materials or toys that the children really prefer to use, and you're trying to get them to come away from using those materials and into a quiet space. Limiting those visual distractions can be very helpful, as well as auditory distractions of loud banging, loud music, or loud activity happening elsewhere. She is also defining that she needs to have the book. Yoga mats will need to be laid out. So again, that can be part of the preparation that you're doing with the children, or it can be one that you are setting up so they walk in. The reason that this is not entirely great is that how do the yoga mats want to be laid out? Do we want them to be laid out in a circle? Do we want them to be laid out side by side? How far apart they should be? When talking about yoga mats for young children, they should be the distance apart of an adult shoulder. That allows the children to be able to spread out their arms and have some tipping space so they're not tipping over on top of other people. They're able to keep their personal space. Even when they fall out, it's a little bit bigger bubble, so they're not impacting the people around them. And also inside of this would be to have the script that you're going to be using for the yoga sequence that's going to be introduced. In this last one, which is really not so great, is it gives how to prepare the emotion cards. It's not really the setting up of the activity. Having this in the language corner, having the cards with the emotion cards with either Velcro or magnet on the back to be able to use them on the board. Are they already set up on the board? To being very specific so another adult can pick this up and support the setup. Or you can ask somebody else, could you please set up this activity while I'm doing the gathering for the day? That can also be very helpful in this situation. So being really prepared on what sort of preparations needed for having the activity to go from start to finish without having to run around and track materials down. Here we are at the end of this section for setting up, and we've covered all of the whys, and we've looked at some really good examples of what setup can be, and maybe wanting something a little bit more detail oriented, but not necessarily about the creation of the materials. So now we're coming to the end, and next steps is differentiation. And setup before differentiation, these two things can be very helpful. And you might find after you write your differentiation that you have to go back to your setup plan, because you might find that you have this plan to meet the needs of all of the learners in the group, and it might spark your memory that you need to have something different in your setup plan, or maybe you might want to write something additional in your setup plan in consideration of the aspect of differentiation. So these two things are really connected closely together. So you might find yourself going back and forth between these two, and a and having something set up in advance is very helpful for it to go off smoothly and as possible as it can when we are following the children and taking their interests into consideration. That doesn't always look so smoothly. The primary focus of wanting to be set up is to make sure that you have all your materials so you can stay with the children and stay engaged with them. If you need any materials and the children are old enough, you can absolutely send them off to go and get something and bring it back to the space in which you are running the activity. It's really better to have everything planned and put together so it is ready for your setup process. So now we're going to move on to differentiation. See you there.